New York's Columbia University, one of America's, indeed one of the world's most prestigious seats of learning. And right now, one of its most controversial. For Columbia has become the main battleground in a war being fought across American campuses over the issue of academic freedom.
I have a feeling that universities have been hijacked. In other words, the people I went to school with in the late 60s, early 70s, my contemporaries, who were the revolutionaries as students, did not achieve their goals of taking over and changing the country, but they did take over and change the university.
Remember, there's a right-wing effort across America today to silence any criticism of Israel and of the U.S. government. So the Israeli lobby found this an opportune time to enter the university and silence critics of Israel because of this prevailing mood. And therefore, the real attack is on academic freedom.
Head down into Columbia's main bookstore, and there you can find the New York Times bestseller, The 101 Most Dangerous Professors in America. Its flyleaf claims these professors spew violent anti-Americanism, preach anti-Semitism, while collecting tax dollars and tuition fees to indoctrinate our children. 9 of the professors listed are from Columbia, the highest of any university. Amongst those named, Joseph Massad.
And therefore, any kind of a straight-out translation or believing that, he's not someone who believes that, he's not kind of an...
Just 100 metres from the bookstore, Associate Professor Massad is taking a class. He's up for tenure this year. If successful, he'll have a job for life.
Political representations today, George W. Bush's sort of "you are evil, therefore we are good" is very much part of the slave morality. Whatever you may think of that definition, it's still a reaction.
Professor Massad teaches courses about Israel and Palestine that some of his Israeli and Jewish American students find confronting. For example, he describes Israel as a racist state.
Of course, when I say that Israel is racist, I am referring to it descriptively, and I'm not simply attempting to insult the country. Israel has a large number of laws that discriminate between Jewish and non-Jewish citizens.
There are certain individuals, like Joseph Massad, who are so extremist that one really has to wonder what is their role in a university.
Criticism of Columbia's Middle Eastern professors intensified back in 2002 at the height of the Second Intifada. A website was launched called Campus Watch. Students were encouraged to dob in professors whom they believe were giving a distorted view of Middle Eastern history and politics.
Well, let me, if I can, begin by going in our website. We have had an ongoing Columbia project with a series of essays commissioned on Columbia.
Winfield Myers is the editor of Campus Watch, the self-proclaimed watchdog of Middle Eastern studies in the US and Canada. He makes no secret the website pays special attention to academics like Joseph Massad, who are up for tenure or promotion.
Faculty hiring is always very crucial because professors hired today, of course, are going to do the hiring tomorrow of young scholars who are coming out of graduate school. And one of the worst problems in Middle East studies is that the gatekeepers themselves are loath to hire people who disagree with their political ideology.
When Campus Watch began, it singled out 8 professors. Columbia's Hamid Dabashi was one of them.
And the gist of the argument was that I am anti-American, anti-Israeli, and pro-terrorist. These are my qualifications. And then my students were encouraged in that website to spy against me.
Professor Dabashi says he and the other professors were targeted by an email spamming campaign that threatened to bring down Columbia's computer servers.
And on my voicemail, I had some obscene, racist and life-threatening voicemails. In them,
so death threats?
Exactly.
Another targeted, Rashid Khalidi, now also at Columbia.
I mean, they cited an introduction to a book I had written, taking a line from the first paragraph and a line from the second paragraph and just running them together to make me appear to say something I hadn't said.
Until last year, Professor Khalidi and other Columbia faculty members gave free lectures to local high school teachers. Then a New York tabloid, sourcing material from the internet, began a campaign against his participation.
And then the school board people, apparently taken aback, said, well, if this is true about him, then he shouldn't be involved in this program. When that happened, the university reacted very strongly, saying that if the city is going to try and impose political criteria for the faculty who are doing this, we won't be involved with this program. And I mean, I was doing it as a public service. It wasn't as if I needed the job. It was a thing that we did. We're very sorry, as were the teachers, that we had to stop the program.
The highest profile victim claimed by Campus Watch so far has been Michigan University professor Juan Cole. This is his webblog, Informed Comment, where he accuses the Bush administration of lying about the Iraq War and deliberately spinning and misleading the US public. Earlier this year, Professor Cole was first invited to apply for a job at Yale, then found unsuitable. The driving force behind Campus Watch is Daniel Pipes, one of America's most prominent and influential supporters of Israel. He says his website helped ignite a campaign in the local media against Juan Cole's appointment.
And so when the faculty came to make a decision, they took these other concerns into account, and he was rejected. And I believe, he says, and I would agree, that it was because there was outside involvement. Had it simply been the professors on their own in the traditional way, he would have received that appointment.
New York is home to both Columbia University and the largest Jewish population of any city in the world. The campaign against academics critical of Israel has been extended into a film titled Columbia Unbecoming. Ariel Beery was one of the Jewish students behind the film, made 2 years ago while he was at Columbia.
The film was only a documentation of testimonies. That's all. It never meant to be a film itself, never meant for public consumption. It was never
the film accuses 5 professors in Columbia's Middle East department of intimidating students. Ariel Beery says it was meant only for the eyes of the university administration.
The play against the professors didn't have anything to do with their political statements. It had to do with how they used their power in the classroom to limit the academic students' freedom of students.
But from the word go, the film was financed and controlled not by the students, but by a pro-Israel group called the David Project. This is their website. There's a link to view the film, but it doesn't work. In fact, a copy of the film has never been released to the public. But the David Project certainly made sure the film's allegations were spread far and wide.
I am a journalist for the New York Jewish Week, which is the largest Jewish newspaper in America, and I was contacted by the David Project, I believe sometime in October of 2004, as soon as, very early in the process of the film becoming known. My own initial findings were that the film, at best, was deeply flawed, and at worst, was making a disingenuous case.
Lyle Lebovitz contacted 36 mainly Jewish students who'd studied under the professors accused in the film. He asked them if they'd been intimidated.
I was rather shocked by what I found because not a single student reported any such sentiment. The only thing that I kept hearing constantly was that the experience in the classroom, the experience under these professors, while often challenging, while often diverging from what the students have learned in the Israeli public education system or in Hebrew school, was actually exhilarating, was thought-provoking. In other words, was everything college is supposed to be. I also had an opportunity to speak to some of the students by then who were interviewed in the film, and was rather surprised to learn that a number of them have not even studied under the professors who are being accused.
The David Project started screening the film to select audiences, including in Israel. Lyle has now seen the film 4 or 5 times, and each time it's been changed.
Disturbing. For example, I witnessed the film being screened at an academic conference where interstitials were inserted with quotes from the professor's articles, and the whole tone of the film was sort of re-edited to feel very rational, very factual, very straightforward. And then a few weeks later, in a Jewish community gathering, the film was shown again, and this time certain interviews were inserted that were much more emotional in nature, and the interstitials with the quotes were taken out. And the whole effect was to stir people into action rather than to promote some intellectual debate. I think such manipulation of content is simply unfair.
News of the film sent New York's tabloids into a frenzy. They described Colombia variously as Poison Ivy, Hate You on the Hudson, and teaching Hate 101. Prominent amongst those accused in the film of intimidating students, Joseph Massad.
Remember, as soon as this defamatory film had been released, a member of Congress in New York immediately called on Columbia University to fire me. The editorial board of 2 newspapers in New York also called on Columbia to fire me. There was a special meeting of the New York City Council about the situation of alleged intimidation that pro-Israel Jewish students had been subjected to at Columbia.
Some of Professor Massad's students, like Monique Doles, leapt to his defence.
And we often had people who were outside of the class come into the class and disrupt the class and so on. So well, they would sit in the back of the room. They said they were auditors, but they were clearly there to come and disrupt Professor Massad's class. And so if anyone was being intimidated, it was the professors like Professor Massad.
In Brooklyn, I tracked down another of Joseph Massad's former students, Ben Wheeler.
Well, I'm Jewish, and when I was in Hebrew school growing up, the very simple description of Israel and Palestine that I heard was that there was an uninhabited desert wasteland, and after the Holocaust, the Jews needed a homeland, and this land was available, and so they made the desert bloom. And there was sort of no mention of the Palestinians, and if there ever was, it was essentially that, yeah, there's some people who aren't happy about it because they don't like Jews.
Ben says Joseph Massad did present a pro-Palestinian position, but he did not browbeat students.
There was certainly a mixed reaction among the Jewish American students. I think that a lot of students were offended by the particular facts that Massad was choosing to focus on and talk about. Many of them partially because they had known those facts, and I think a lot of students were surprised or shocked to hear the criticism of Israel that was more intense and more cogent than perhaps they were expecting.
But Columbia Unbecoming and the media campaign orchestrated by the David Project had its impact. University President Lee Bollinger, who declined to be interviewed for this story, initiated an investigation.
I think this is a terrible precedent. The only precedent I can think of that is similar would be during McCarthyism, when the university would crack down and set up committees to investigate professors for their political views. I was very saddened to see that the administration had, in fact, cooperated with these outside forces against its own professors and its own faculty. Perhaps it should.
The investigation cleared the professors, with one minor exception, for Joseph Massad. It was found he'd threatened to banish a student from his class for defending Israeli military tactics. It's an allegation he continues to deny. 20 students present in the class have signed a letter saying the allegation is unequivocally false.
So basically they threw a morsel for the right-wing forces that were besieging the university, And instead of standing by academic freedom, instead of saying that this is clearly a sham of an allegation, that there was not an element of truth to it, so this was not actually a legal procedure. This was a committee, in my opinion, a harassment committee, an inquisition committee that did not give sort of the right of habeas corpus or due process to the accused.
Now a new battleground is emerging in America's academic wars. Rather than target individual professors, the whole area of Middle East studies is coming under threat. And the new weapon of choice is funding, both private and public. This is the annual conference of the American Political Science Association, addressed on this occasion by Harvard professor Stephen Walt.
You have a recipe for interfering all over the world. There are lots of problems.
Professor Walt caused a stir earlier this year when he and a colleague published an article asserting that American support for Israel could only be explained by the domestic political power wielded by the Israel lobby.
There was a taboo here, if you will, an elephant in the room that wasn't being discussed openly. And our main goal was to try and get this subject out in the open where we could talk about it in a sort of candid and serious way. I think that we've accomplished.
Professor Walt says at Harvard there was concern his article may have cost the university money.
I was just told indirectly that there were some donors that were very upset, and I had at least one colleague who at one point said that, you know, I might have cost Harvard $100 million. Now, I don't think that's actually true, but that was the kind of concern that was raised.
Many of these academics gathered to listen to Professor Walt work at private universities. These universities have seen an increase in donations and endowments recently, from oil-rich Arabs on one side and from wealthy Jewish philanthropists on the other.
The last, I would say 6 or 7 years have seen a sort of arms race, if you will, on who funds more departments or more chairs to promote a certain viewpoint.
At Colombia, the professors in the Middle East department believe there's a civil war underway for the hearts and minds of Americans.
I consider myself integral, part and parcel of a struggle within the United States to safeguard it as a free and democratic republic. I oppose the mutation of this free and democratic republic into a predatory empire. This is what I oppose.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Now the battle has reached Congress itself. For 50 years, the US government has funded Middle East studies, recognising an understanding of the region is vital to US strategic interests. There are now moves to bring that funding, worth more than $80 million per year, under congressional oversight.
I think it would have a terribly chilling effect on people if, you know, a university professor suddenly felt that their entire program might be cut if they wrote something that the administration didn't like.
Daniel Pipes, on the other hand, would welcome congressional guidance.
I mean, this is a key issue, the Middle East, in American public life, and we need scholars who take their skills and apply them. One finds, for example, a willingness to take American governmental money, but an unwillingness to provide the quid pro quo, which is to be of some service to the American government, the American taxpayer, the American people.
Lyle Lebovitz, journalist for the Jewish Week, believes debate in America has already been truncated.
I'm a 9th generation Israeli. I'm a lieutenant in reserve in the Israeli army. And when I came here to the United States about 6 years ago, I was surprised to find that positions or arguments that were considered almost mainstream in Israel were here sort of anathema.
For example, Lyle says in Israel, advocating a secular state with both Jewish and Palestinian citizens is an acceptable, if not widely popular, part of the debate.
If you make it here, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, it does not go over well. It is perceived as an attack on Israel's very right to exist. The tragedy is not that the discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has become so contentious. The tragedy is that the discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has become impossible.
you.